room is. It's amazing to look at it from this perspective. I hope you had a great morning, and we're running a few minutes behind, so I'm going to quickly introduce our keynote speaker for lunch. Before I do that, I want to correct something that's in the program. We'll have the book signing today from 5 to 6. I think the program says maybe 3 to 4 or something like that, but the book signing will be after our program concludes today. All right. We have been talking about, as you know, the something that is there when nothing else is there, that is not there when anything else is. I know. It's a mouthful. It's like WSHRN, the Western Shorebird Hemispheric Reserve Network, right? So we all know what it is, but we really can't describe it, right? But we know that whenever we experience it, it makes us feel better. Maybe it's the warmth of the sun, or the sound of the waves, or the smell of mud. But it's not something you can hug or draw or even be sure that anyone with whom you share it will see it the same way or feel it the same way that you do. But you know it makes you feel better, and you know it will make that person that you share it with feel better for their own reasons. Dr. Nichols is a senior fellow at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies at Monterey, a research associate at the California Academy of Sciences, and co-founder of Ocean Revolution, which is an international network of young ocean advocates. He has also been involved with conservation travel and sea turtle conservation, and he is here today to tell you about his quest to connect people with water. He has spent his career trying to find a scientific connection between water and our brains. He knows, just like we all do, that when we experience certain things, we feel better. He outlines his experience in some of his findings in his book, Blue Mind, which is available for sale and signing later today. So without further delay, please let me introduce you to Dr. Nichols.
Probably should have run a little faster. It's really great to be here with you, and as I've reflected on coming here and learned about this organization, all of the organizations that are part of this network, my comment to one of the local journalists was that this is the way you do it. This is the future. This is what we wish all organizations were doing in the way they were approaching these problems, in a very highly collaborative way, but from the heart. And without fear of words like love and hugging mud. I never thought of hugging mud, but I think that's on my bucket list now. I'm gonna hug some mud. So, but what I'm here to speak about, it turns out, I learned this morning from Megan in her lovely opening remarks this morning, and from Mary Oliver, I'm here to talk about nothing. That thing that we refer to as nothing, that we often leave out, the feelings, the emotions, that blank space, which is the reason why you take those long walks out in nothing, in quotes. And it's that nothing that has been the focus of my research for the past few years. And so that's what we're going to talk about. But if you need to get in touch, I'm pretty easy to find: email, social media, Twitter. If you tweet, use the Blue Mind hashtag, and you'll meet other people who are part of this conversation. And if you have questions or need some of the resources that I'll go through relatively quickly, some of the science, some of the publications, I'd be happy to send you PDFs if you need them. So the last time I was here was 1992. The date's up top, February, 26 years ago. I was on Jekyll Island for my first sea turtle symposium. I've attended most of them since then as a sea turtle biologist, but I came here and I was pretty green, you might say, no pun intended, or intended entirely, and I got hooked. I got hooked on the whole thing, the animals, the people, the camaraderie, the shared love of wildlife, and it's taken me 26 years to get back here, but here we are. I recently did a survey, and we've asked about 1,000 people so far what are the water-related activities they participated in. Just thought I'd just start out by showing you this. Swimming is the top one, but wildlife watching ranks pretty high, and then going to aquariums and science centers. So you've got it all here, the top three, right? Swimming, people swim. You have great interpretive centers. And, of course, wildlife watching is one of the things, going out and hanging out with birds and turtles and getting out and paddling with dolphins and any of the other critters. We also asked some questions about the benefits of water. So, for example, relaxation. We asked about relaxation, happiness, romance, play, and creativity. And most people, over 95% of people who responded, albeit a biased sample size, 95% said that they get the same as, more than, or much more of that stuff, that nothing, quote unquote, stuff that we often leave out of our technical reports and our justifications and our policy. So just this nothing is a big deal for 95% of the people who answered the survey. For Bruce Springsteen, because he says, actually sang, the great poet Bruce Springsteen sang, "'Cause down the shore everything's all right." You know what he meant by that? Yes, you do. You do know exactly what he meant by that. Carlos Argentino, the great composer and singer, "En el mar la vida es más sabrosa, en el mar te quiero mucho más." In the sea, life is better. Life is technically here tastier, richer. In the sea, I love you more. Beautiful lines. What is it about the sea that makes us love more, right? Makes life better. Here we are. So you probably got a blue marble in your bag. So if you take, during the course of the next few minutes that I'll be speaking, find your blue marble and just have it handy. That is a gift that I'll explain towards the end here. It's a reminder that from a million miles away, we look like that little blue marble. It's a reminder that everything we do, the big things, the little things, the good things and the bad things, that they all matter. And it's a reminder that we don't do anything alone. It may feel like it sometimes, but even getting here today required probably thousands of people to support you to be sitting in the chair, wearing what you're wearing, having driven what you drove, using the energy that you used, these lights to be on, the people cooking for us, and so on and so forth. So thousands of people got you to where you're sitting right now. We never do anything alone. We always work together. You thought it was just a marble. It's a life lesson in 3 parts. I want you to hang on to that marble, and I'll explain it a little more. I like to ask people right out the gate, what's your water? Kind of reflecting a little bit on where we started this morning. I'm not going to ask you to close your eyes right now, but just imagine that water that is your first water, your favorite water. What's its name? What does it taste like? What does it look like? And what's the water that you dream about? When you're feeling a bit dry, that you need to get back to that water, what's that water that you dream about going back to? And when did you fall in love with it? When did you fall in love, head over heels, with that water? When was that time that you said, this feels good? I feel like the best version of me right now in this place, by this water, in this water. And who took you there? A parent, a teacher, a guide, a friend? Who was your guide that introduced you to that water? That's a question that can really bring up some deep emotion. And then the flip of that is, who have you been that person for? Who right now would be answering this question with your name, picturing you in their imagination? Who have you been the guide for, introducing them to the water that would be the most epic water of their lives? For some people, that relationship is very direct. It's hydration and hygiene. It's bucket by bucket, sometimes carried over long distances between the source and the home. For some people, it's more playful. Some kids learning, these are refugee kids, learning to swim. Dealing with a lot of stress, but learning to swim. Their water is probably that pool. For some people, it's watching the dolphins bow ride, standing in the bow of that boat and then having the dolphins come, and you really kind of never want that moment to end. Everybody moves to the bow. If you've ever had that experience, you know what I'm talking about. Hopefully not the captain. Hopefully the captain stays out of the bow. And then the dolphins decide when it's over. The wonderful wetlands and open spaces, green space and blue space here along the Georgia coast. Places that you go and experience nothing, but experience something and everything. The waters that we fish in, if you ever are spending time fly fishing or fishing, you know that sometimes it's a misnomer. Sometimes there are no fish involved in fishing. There's a lot of standing and looking, contemplating. You could even call it meditation. It's quiet conversations with loved ones and friends. It's just calm time in the water or by the water. Sometimes it's a little more active, a little whitewater action. Sometimes it's our families. We take our families out paddling, swimming, diving, walking, exploring. And it brings us closer together. If you ask my kids about their best times with mom and dad, they will talk about water, inevitably. Something about the water and family together, it's the best, plain and simple. It's the best moments of my life have been with my family, my grandparents, my mom and dad, my kids, all of us, my brothers and sisters, in the water, near the water. Sometimes you're just passing over it, whether it's a causeway or a bridge. A well-designed structure is the one that gives you a nice view while you're getting from point A to B safely. A poorly designed structure, I think, would be the one that got you there safely but gave you no joy, right? So keeping those sides somewhat open so that you have that moment of joy as you're going over the bridge where you look out on the water. Maybe the best view of the water of the day or of the year even. Getting out on these wide, long beaches, even on a busy day. This is a busy day right here. You can achieve solitude and hear yourself think in a way that in this busy world we often miss. It's a place where we start our dreams. Maybe the dreams that become the reality, that become the projects and the movements, start there. They start here. They start there. Sleep under the sharks. That's epic. Night in the aquarium. Sometimes we bring our non-human friends with us. They like the water too, some of them. The Oregon coast. Sometimes we learn new skills together, like learning to surf. And sometimes we interact with these beautiful animals, like sea turtles. Some of my favorites out there in the water are these animals. Or animals like this. Brian Scary's photo is completely submerged, eye to eye. Sometimes the water is frozen. That's still blue mind. That's still water, right? As the seasons change, so does the water, and it reflects back to us. As we change, it reflects ourselves back to us. Even a drink at the drinking fountain. You stood in line, and remember when you were a kid and you got to stand in line and wait your turn until you got to be front of the line, and you just grabbed a hold of that thing, and you're king or queen of the whole school, and you just took your time with that sip of water. I don't know how we got by. That's Jack Black. That's his water. Kind of funny. But this is a conversation that begins in your bathroom and it ends out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It's all this water. It all helps us to be more connected and more peaceful. Water is everywhere. This is not just a coastal conversation. It's an everywhere conversation. This thing, this nothing, is everywhere. And it's available for the taking, for the asking, just by showing up and going. For me, my water is Dad. This man died last year on Earth Day. And he was the man who taught me to swim, taught me to dive, took me places, helped me build confidence. I rode on his shoulders in the water. We did this thing called the turtle ride. You've probably done it with kids at some point, where they ride on your back and you dive like a turtle and they hold on. I do it with my kids now, and they'll probably do it with their kids. I remember this time I was 11 years old in the Rocky Mountains. That day, that moment, that photograph right there brings me right back to that exact instant. I felt like the best version of my 11-year-old self right then. Fast forward, there's my daughter. She's 8. This is Indonesia, and we were out looking for turtles, studying sea turtles. She would say the same thing. When she looks at this photo, this is the photo she chose for me to show to you. that reflects that feeling like everything is not just okay, everything is perfect out there together. Now, I don't have a picture of myself with a turtle, but I was really into them at that age as well. We didn't take as many pictures back then for some reason. Everybody, we have pictures of everything now, it seems, but I could not, I spend a lot of time with turtles. I could not find one except for this one. That's the turtle on the right, and looking pretty crocodile hunter there for 11 years old. I love turtles. I see them everywhere, and even in a room like this, there's usually at least one person that resembles a turtle, and whoever laughs the loudest is usually you. That's what I've learned. I remember telling my dad that I was going to be a turtle biologist, and it felt like that Luke Darth moment. He was like, "What are you going to do with a degree in turtles, son?" And I looked at him, and I had no idea what I was going to say, so I said, "Everything." And that just baffled him. But he came along, and he supported my passion for turtles, which took me to northwestern Mexico, the region called the Baja California Peninsula and the Sonoran Desert that wraps around the Sea of Cortez, or the Gulf of California there. And that was my study site. And I set out to study sea turtles. One of the first things I did was we put a satellite transmitter on a turtle named Adelita and released her into the ocean. And there's a lot to say about turtle biology right now, but this is not a turtle conference, so I'm going to refrain. I could just go off for about a week of turtle science right now, but I'm going to hold myself back. But the interesting metaphor here, as this loops around, watch her. She had lived for 10 years in a tank. It was released. She swims a couple strokes, and then, boom, she pauses, as if to say, where's the wall? Finding no wall that she had imagined in her brain, as we tend to do, turtles and humans alike. We create artificial barriers that are purely imaginary. She continued to swim, and on the other side of that imaginary wall was the rest of her life. 7,000 miles of open ocean that she needed to cross to get home. So take the metaphor wherever you would like to take this metaphor. It's a big, healthy, juicy metaphor. Imaginary walls and swimming home, swimming through those walls. What are those things that you're imagining that are in your way that really are nothing? They really are just in your head. So this turtle decided, time to go home. Hormones kicked in, time to make that big, long trip back to her natal beaches in Japan. And she swam all the way 7,000 miles over the course of 368 days. This was 1996. The internet was new. We put our data in real time online. To the dismay of our advisors, they said, people will steal your turtle data. I remember thinking, what would they do with stolen turtle data? Why am I afraid? And the only things that happened were good. Teachers collaborated with their students and taught them math, poetry, science, geography. People smarter than us who knew different techniques collaborated with our data set. And it just opened up friendships and collaboration. So another lesson there from this turtle who made it all the way back to Isohama. The end of the story is inconclusive. I know that's probably on your mind. What happened to this turtle, Adelita, who was named after the daughter of a fisherman? We don't know. The last signal came from Isohama, Japan. And so that's what we know. So I have some theories, but we can talk about that later on or over at the workshop. So that's the question. What walls have you swum through? And probably more importantly, what walls do you need to swim through? The ones that are still holding you back in your tank, keeping you from getting there. This is Chuy Lucero, one of my best friends and a former sea turtle hunter, who is now one of the best sea turtle protectors on the planet in Baja California. And we're celebrating the 20th year of Grupo Tortuguero with him and his colleagues coming up next week. This is Juan de la Cruz Villalejos. He is made of sea turtle because not only was a sea turtle hunter, he ate a lot of them. And he also collaborated with us to bring sea turtles back from the brink of extinction. The so-called enemies of nature are the true heroes of conservation sometimes. This was last year. We had our 19th meeting, and I would say this is a sister organization. 100 Miles and Grupo Tortuguero are sister organizations for sure. Same spirit, same collaborative energy, science-based, but heart, a lot of heart. So a lot of fishermen, turtle hunters, scientists, government folks, business people get together with the one thing in common to saving sea turtles. And it's working. I wrote this book, Worldwide Travel Guide to Sea Turtles, to really emphasize that there's more value than the eggs, the meat, the shell, the consumptive value. There's this emotional value, which we sometimes call tourism, but really at the base of it is an emotional value. And turtles have given me some of the best moments of my life, for my family, for my friends, my colleagues, and continue to do so. So that's another value of these wild animals and working with them that they give us. Not just biodiversity, not just consumptive value, but this emotional value. We and these animals are one and the same. We're made of the same stuff. We rely on the same planet. There's this great quote, and this is the most words I'll put on the screen pretty much right now, but basically the upshot is that if we used to think if we just had enough information, we could solve all these problems. But we know that it takes more than that. It takes movement. It takes spirit. And if you don't have that, you just have, information. And scientists aren't necessarily so good at that. Some are, and some of the great scientists have been throughout history. But that's just a reminder that it's about the cultural and spiritual shift as well. So now that we understand how important waters and oceans are, we need to widen our gaze. And that's what this conference is doing. Really, I think every single year, your gaze gets wider. You include new perspectives, new artists, new kinds of science, new insights, new kinds of beauty. And so the piece that I bring to this is the neuroscience, neuropsychology. What if we started talking to the people who study the brain and neurons more and asking them what they might be able to offer us? We used to understand the brain as a black box. You could stimulate it and see what happened, but you couldn't really look inside. And when you could look inside, it was usually after the user of the brain was entirely done using it, if you get my drift. You could look at anomalies and injuries and differences post-mortem and compare those. Then we got this technology that allows us to look at the brain while the user is still using it. So EEG measures electricity, fMRIs measure oxygen. So it allows us to look inside while we're doing things, while we're thinking and acting and responding to our environment. We're able to look at compare the brain at rest to the brain doing processing information or doing math or even ruminating, worrying, or being stressed. We're able to quantify, in some ways, love, the biochemistry of love. And now this may seem really kind of not romantic at all. I find it actually kind of sexy, really, frankly. But the neuroscience of love is a thing. So next time you feel uncomfortable saying the word love at a scientific meeting, give me a call. I'll send you the PDF on the neuroscience of love. Right? It is biochemistry. It is neurochemistry. Oxytocin builds trust. Right? There's a chemical basis to trust building. Right? In all mammals. Humans alike. This has been written about, applied neuroscience has been written about in wonderful ways in a lot of different fields, but not so much in the realm of nature, conservation, water, forests, and the outdoors. So from music to magic to creativity to stress to happiness, you find in that section of the library or bookstore lots of resources, fascinating reads. The cover of Scientific American a few years ago, the science of meditation, the science of relaxation. 10 years ago, you would not have seen that. There it is, on the cover of Scientific American. Nobel Prizes being won in applied neuroscience. Seems every year, Nobel Prize being won by neuroscientists. This is literally the golden age of neuroscience. We're living in it right now. Every day, there seems to be very useful, practical, and even life-changing advances in the field of brain studies. We need to start to consider how to apply those to fixing what's broken, not just fixing ourselves, but fixing what's broken on the planet. It's a fascinating time to be alive, to be engaged in coastal protection and understanding the human brain. It's the first generation to have a user's guide to our own brain. Think about that. Imagine if you didn't have a user's guide to putting together that IKEA furniture. You would just have a bunch of nuts and bolts and pieces of wood left over and be scratching your head going, what was that for? First generation have a user's guide to our own brain. Think about how useful that could be for the younger generations growing up. Many realms intersect with neuroscience. There's so much application of these insights in so many realms. And again, applying it to conservation in nature is just beginning to happen in a real way. This is a colleague from the UK made this graphic. If you could put nature in a pill, which you can't, don't worry, it might be called salutogen, and it would be known to lower blood pressure, lower heart rate, promote general well-being, be available from the parks and seashores around you, and by the way, have very few, if no, side effects. Remember that book? It was from my childhood, but scared a lot of people out of the water. It scared me out of the bathtub even. I thought, people didn't want to go in the deep end of their swimming pools because of this book and the movie and the sequel and the sequel and the sequel and the sequel, if you remember those. There's a whole new generation of books that's encouraging people to get back in the water, get back in the forest, get back in nature for a whole set of new reasons. And it isn't fear, it's love. In order to do good economics, you have to keep in mind that people are human. Simple idea, right? But often left out of the study of economics, the human component. Right? We are not always rational decision makers, we're mostly irrational decision makers. So enter this field that I call neuroconservation, which is kind of a mashup of neuroscience and conservation biology. In order to do good conservation, you have to keep in mind also that people are human. So not leaving the human component out. This is just a simple little clip from you can see this is an EEG combined with an eye tracker. So you see the diver swimming, and you see the brain regions that are activated, and then you see the turtle enter the picture. What's interesting is the eye contact. So those little heat spots are showing where the subjects are looking, right there. Looking at the turtle, looking at the diver, and looking in the eyes. So we have the technology to study how we interact with nature and get some insights into how we do our job better. We often talk about trophic cascades and ecosystem services in ecology, but we need to talk also about neurologic cascades and emotional services. And that's where you bring back the natural area, and then people visit, and then they fall in love, and then they join the movement. They teach their kids fall in love and join the movement. That's the neurologic cascade. And the emotional services that we are all bringing to our communities are enormous. So we often list the value of nature as the ecological, the economic, and the educational. But yes, let's put in the emotional component. Do not leave it out. In fact, put it at the top. The ecological, economic, educational, and emotional components are all connected. And adding in the emotion, the science of emotion, enhances everything else. And just a reminder that emotion is, in fact, a biological response to our environment. We can study it as good scientists. So we're taught to leave the emotion out. Check it at the door on your way into the serious meeting. And I'm trying to tell you, what I'm trying to say here is bring it in strategically, powerfully, as a way to enhance the work that we're doing. There's a great report done called Heartwired, and it's all about advocacy. And I highly recommend you look it up and download it and read it. It's not only about nature, it's about all kinds of advocacy, but it gives some great insights into this conversation. And the team that created that report, Heartwired, is now working with nonprofits to apply it to ocean and coastal conservation. So Blue Mind is medicine for whatever ails you. Getting outside and getting by the water is good medicine. Because 60% of diseases, disorders are connected to stress, exacerbated by stress, or even caused by stress. And we live in a stressed out world, increasingly connected. Depression is hitting our young people. Social media plays a role in that. I'm a dad of 2 daughters, so I'm intimately aware and paying very close attention to this dynamic. This last year, 2017, was the highest level of stress in the US for a decade, right? Lots of reasons feeding into that. Everywhere I travel, I see headlines like this. And you know these reports, right? People are dealing with the stress in ways that make it worse, that break them apart, break their families apart, break their communities apart, and I fear break our nation apart. At its extreme, you have post-traumatic stress, and I think a lot more people than military and first responders suffer from some form of post-traumatic stress or another. Jim Harrison, the great writer, the late, great Jim Harrison, said of the 12 or 13 people he knew that committed suicide or took their own lives, none of them had any interest in nature. It's a small group of writers that he knew. Just one person's insight. This is not science. This is a poet giving his insight. This is what I call red mind. And if you could go to the doctor and have it removed, well, who would do that procedure? Yes, please. I'll go take my red mind out. So we come along and we heap fear, anger, shame, and facts on top of already red minds, thinking we're going to convince them to join our movement. And it doesn't get us very far. It works, as Megan said this morning, but it doesn't really solve our problems in the long term. We burn people out. We burn out ourselves. So this is the typical ocean pitch. The world's oceans cover 71% of the planet, give us a lot of the water. They give us a lot of oxygen to breathe. They regulate climate, this long list. They give us seafood and jobs, economic security for billions of people. But there's a crisis. Despite warnings, things are just falling apart, and it's your fault. All right, then we follow up with, want to join our club? Sound familiar? Yeah. And the answer is a resounding, no, I'm not sure. Let me get back to you on that. We need to dial in the gratitude and the love, because it works, and build the trust, because it works. That's the only way we're going to solve problems. We know now that green space is good for our mental health, and that blue space is a little bit better. It's not a competition between blue and green, by the way, or oceans and mountains, but the water holds its own in this conversation. Listening to water is good for us. And this is an ancient idea that goes all the way back to the beginning of our artistic responses to the world around us. Indigenous cultures around the world know that water is medicine. People have painted the ocean and the coast for thousands of years because of this emotional connection that we have. And people have stood in front of those paintings to try to just get a little bit of that feeling of blue mind. Even the New Yorker, they like to put water on their cover. And then there's that one right there. Corona Beer sells their beer with blue mind. Nestea sells their tea with the Nestea plunge. Remember that feeling? This great song by Trace Adkins makes me cry every time I hear it when I'm driving. I don't know why, but she thinks we're just fishing. You know, it's not about the fish. It's not about the fishing. It's about that moment together. The last scene of Shawshank Redemption ends with Morgan Freeman's character Red walking the beach. This is the last line. The Academy Award-winning film Moonlight. There should have been an Academy Award for The Water, Best Supporting Actress in that film. So water played such an important role in that film. Pure water is the world's first and foremost medicine. We know 80% of our brains and 65% of our bodies is water. And it may be partly a blue SIBO effect. See what I did there? The blue SIBO? But that's real. Placebo just means that your body is making the chemistry, that you don't need chemicals. So in summary, water is life. It makes our lives worth living. When we undervalue our waters, we lose them. When we undervalue anyone or anything, bad things happen every time. Water is our first medicine for physical and mental health. And I want you to remember the fourth E, emotion, the emotional benefits, and be fearless in talking about that and writing about that and putting it in your documents. Please, this is my soft kick in the knees, basically. Do not leave it out anymore. In your technical reports, put the science in there. In your communications with media, in your educational work with kids, do not leave it out anymore. Always put it in. Access to water for all people, everyone, through all ages of our lives. And we'll talk about the 7 ages of water in the workshop, which is sort of the continuation, drilling down into some of these concepts coming up after the break. And please, always, again, reiterating that because it's so important, always include your version of this in the way you talk and write about what you do. This is supposed to say Blue Mind right there. There it is. There's something about being at the edge and that leaving that craziness to the left behind and moving into that Blue Mind mode. Something about that. So in the workshop, I'll dig into the 7 ages of water in more detail from birth through death. We'll talk about how Blue Mind applies through each age of our lives. But I want to just go right here. I want to go right back to that marble. If you take it out and hold it up, that's what we look like from 1,000,000 miles away. I did the math. It's pretty close, depending on the length of your forearm, of course. So adjust accordingly. And it's a reminder of all those things, that we live on a water planet where everything we do matters and we do nothing alone. And your homework is to take this blue marble, put it someplace safe, but pass it on to somebody that you want to say thank you to. Because gratitude is a big motivator. And we don't use gratitude enough, I don't think. So it may be somebody going through, checking out at the grocery store who brought their own bag that you don't even know. Go up to them and say, hey, thanks. Or maybe somebody picking up trash on the coast. Or maybe a colleague you've worked with for a long time or a family member. Just make their day and see what happens when you pass on your blue marble with the story that you bring to it, to them. And then ask them to pass it on. We've shared over 1 million blue marbles with millions of people around the world. They're being passed. There's no way to stop it. It is not a funded or a led project. It's sort of viral by nature. And they've reached all kinds of people on every continent with just this simple reminder that water is medicine. We live on a water planet, and let's work together. So hopefully I've been clear. Hopefully you will pass your marble on. Take it as a small gesture of gratitude for all the work you do. I know how hard it is. I know how hard it has been. It will not get easier, I guarantee that. But taking those moments out to refresh and restore yourself, recharge your batteries, get your blue mind on. Don't forget to do that. Because when you come back, you send kind emails. You build collaborative relationships when you're not completely in a red mind mode. So thanks for inviting me, and I look forward to continuing the conversation in the workshop in a little bit. See ya.
Thank you all for sitting and listening to that wonderful conversation or talk about the Blue Mind. I'm just going to announce a little bit of a time change in our schedule. We're going to go to our next session at 1:15, and it'll last until 2:30. Then we'll have a break.